Good evening and welcome to Press Pass. My name is Mark Masai. This is what's coming up. With just 2 days to the repeat election, we assess what lessons to take from the first round and how ready the Fourth Estate really is.
We can confirm that a meeting has taken place.
Can or should media be part of the much-needed mediation between the main political players? Let me introduce you to my panel. Next to me, I have Dorothy Quayo. She is a freelance journalist, has been a revised editor here at the Daily Nation, and at the moment, of course, is on consultancy basis for various platforms, magazines, and what have you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Next to her is Victor Bwire. Thank you so much. He's had a long day, so bear with him if he has one or two slurs in the speech, but he's very much alert. Thank you for joining us. Victor Bwire is a programs manager at the Media Council of Kenya, interacts a lot with the journalists and has been doing so, especially in the lead up to the elections, and will have a lot to tell us. Philip Itale, he is the communications director at ODM. Thank you for joining us. Has been a colleague here at the Daily Nation, but that was eons before I joined. Next to him, we have Henry Maina, who is a regional director for Article 19. Article 19 that is a champion for free expression and freedom of information. Thank you for joining us. And next to him is Eric Ngeno. He is the senior director for messaging at the Presidential Strategic Communications Unit. Now, just to start with an overlook at where we are at the moment, and if we can run some of the shots there, shot there of the journalist, a journalist being harassed. This is Rashid Ronald of KTN in Kisumu, and he was being harassed by some police officers. Just to start on this note, Victor Bwire, you're very keen on the state and the threats that are facing journalists. What is the situation on the ground ahead of this repeat polls?
Thank you, Mark. One, the situation that it is for any other person that is working in the country is not very encouraging. And from what I'm just running around from Kwale to Busia to Bungoma, just interacting with journalists, just to get a feel of the environment in which they are working in. And already there was a lot of, there's no preparedness in terms of even media houses preparing how the journalists. I think the issue of whether there will be an election affected our planning so much that even today, in nation today, they're not so sure who they will deploy to which area. In terms of just logistical thinking and what, and that then has a large implication. We have seen, obviously, the parachute journalists who move around wherever. There's a lot of tension even between the parachute journalists and the local journalists in various areas who feel that journalists come from Nairobi with the politicians, come without context, and are the people who are given, and once they do the misreporting, they leave the local journalists in a lot of problems. Right. So that is already something that is already coming out. There were arrangements around the issue of independent tallying by media houses, which seems again to have died a natural death. And obviously nobody now knows again, because that's what was one of the biggest criticism people had about media, that they failed. They depended on IBC and were supposed to have done their own independent. And there were indications up to last week, Thursday, that media owners were going to do their own, which seems to have fallen off. So again, as a lesson learned, we have gone back. The issue of safety, like you mentioned, the briefing and debriefing of journalists, which areas they are going to right now already, in addition to other areas, either having election or not having election, and anticipated violence, or other areas. What is the preparation like, even at media house levels? Okay. Remember, while after the election 8th, we did a lot of those interactions just to review how we did at CON19, organized one, Kenya Union of Journalists organized another, Media Council organized another, just to reflect on where we could have gone wrong.
But has there been enough of that this time round, expecting...
That's what I'm telling you, that while we got those feedback and we had a lot of things we said we could do before either the 26th election, or we are anticipating a lot of elections by March next year, after the 6 months, there will be a lot of by-elections. we had thought that those lessons will help us as media, as an industry to move, but they have not been time. All the suggestions that people gave during those forums, I don't see any of the media houses of individual journalists who have done that, because some of these things is either institutional, but the others which are also individual.
Well, someone who's watching would say, come on guys, you knew within 60 days there'd be a repeat election. Were you sleeping on the job? That's easy to say, but from experience, given what we are faced with, peculiar situations and circumstances that we haven't. I mean, you've covered elections enough times. This is something that we haven't been faced with, the situation on the ground right now.
Covered in the sense of editing?
Exactly.
Yes. And truly, I think the biggest problem that we have right now, Mark, is that there's been a lot of uncertainty. And the uncertainty of whether or not the elections are going to happen can actually genuinely put off or disorient any media house that wants to train its staff. I know it has been bad already before, but this particular situation is extremely unique, and I'm not forgiving or excusing media houses for failure to be prepared or lack of preparedness that Victor points out, and he should know, because he tells us he has been moving around the country. He should know. But at the same time, when the messages that are being sent out are mixed, it becomes very difficult to even organize yourself on what you are going to do.
Let's be candid. You monitor 60-odd TV stations, 139 radio stations, and newspapers as well. We're not very well or adequately prepared for these upcoming elections.
I think, to me, there was too much information for media to grasp sometimes, and sometimes we now just do running after. That many of the time, if for example, when Italy releases a statement from NASA statement, there's no time for interrogation of a statement. What we do is we reproduce. It's called return to sender journalism. You just return what you received. Or if Wanangeno does something from State House, sometimes we have this tendency where we just reproduce. So the interaction with the information, and given the number of issues that came out after the High Court ruling, I mean the Supreme Court ruling, there were too many cases in court, and at some stage Kenyans were not sure who was suing what, for who and for what. And we anticipated. There are even uncertainties up to today, 2 days to an election, of the likely scenarios. If this happens, are we helping people to understand and make a decision out of this thing? Sometimes we are running after, we are chasing after some of the statements and some of our politicians. So to that extent, we are not doing much that we would have done.
All right, and let's speak about the uncertainty, because, I mean, clearly many of the Kenyans are in a point of uncertainty. But let's get a perspective from State House, at least from the man in charge of the messaging. Is this a state, or do you feel we are at a place of uncertainty in terms of the repeat polls?
If I do this now, you'll now start saying that I'm like a broken record, because I'm always speaking about our media institutions' capacity to handle some of the subject matters that come their way. What has happened is that the media defaulted to something that they can do with minimum effort, which is work with that frame of conflict, drama, suspense, and abandon the issues around them. For instance, the controversy and the uncertainty, what we call uncertainty, is completely artificial.
As you stand right, I mean, as you sit where you sit from right now, you're very certain of the repeat polls taking place within 2 days and a few odd hours.
I mean, if they don't take place within the next under 48 hours, we are going to be in a very big problem because of this. What? Article 140 of the Constitution says that if an election is nullified, another one must be held within 60 days. The Supreme Court has ordered. We failed to locate this particular event within the context of the rule of law. What do institutions mean? What do court orders mean? What does the Constitution mean in our lives? We abandoned all that and decided that because in this country, every time we create a crisis, we make the law, the first casualty always is institutions and the law, we make them negotiable. In 1997, we decided that we can create an avenue to have a conversation on IPPG outside the non-legal framework. In 2007, we decided that the constitution was not going to serve us very well, so we went to the National Accord, and well, it served us very well. But the constitution we produced out of that process right now, we have discarded it again because we want to create another crisis which makes the constitution, we can put the constitution aside and play our own little games here. So we have a very deep problem because the media, instead of informing Kenyans and creating certainty, they are the ones talking that uncertainty based on nothing. I remember that before...
You're saying the media is to blame for this state of uncertainty and form of limbo.
And panic. For instance, it's become a genuine question all of a sudden whether elections will be held. Why should we question an order of the Supreme Court?
It's a legitimate question. I mean,
if the Supreme Court could nullify an election, and we all understand that the election is null and void, and they say hold another one within 60 days, how come we can accept that they nullified an election, but we can't accept that they have ordered another one to be held within 60 days, meaning that after 60 days we don't hold an election, we will as a nation have completely defiled the rule of law, the whole foundation
all right,
on which we stand.
Just before Dorothy speaks, Henry, as you listen to Eric speak, that this is this is probably even cosmetic, this uncertainty.
No, I think Ngeno needs to one, appreciate that the media in Kenya has suffered a certain structural problems. So we are not in this state because the media didn't want to report effectively. But one, there's been media capture. So the starting challenge that exists in this country is where NASA and the Office of the President have appropriated the media to slant the message that is out here. What did the Supreme Court ask IEBC to do? It asked them to run a fresh election following the constitutional principles, existing laws, and in 60 days. What has the PSCU wanted us to think about? 60 days. They don't want us to question what were the illegalities and irregularities and have you fixed them. They've repeated 60 days as if that's the only thing the court ordered. So anybody who questions what were the illegalities, what were the irregularities, is brushed aside as creating uncertainty. So that's one problem when you think about Ngeno and his messaging, where he's coming from.
Right.
Because it's a singular narrative which all of us must be whipped to follow. Sadly, the media has fallen into that trap. Because when the IBC declared that we will have the elections on 17th, we all began discussing, are you prepared? And we were discussing the 60 days as opposed to saying, are you prepared in terms of constitutionality? Have you followed every small principle? And are you sure that we are not going to end up with another election that could be nullified? Two, what were the illegalities? Some of the illegalities that were clearly pointed out, we saw the executive and a partisan parliament beginning to try and regularize them. An example was the adverts that were run after parliament was prorogued, which went against the Constitution and the Election Offences Act. Nobody was sued for those. But what do we see instead? We see a process that begins to tell us Parliament is the only body, and for sure it is, that is entitled to making laws. But Parliament is entitled to make constitutionally laws. Right. It's not entitled to make any law so that we remain fighting over the constitutionality of the law. So I want to be able to point out that there are three challenges facing the media in the state we are today. You showed a clip where Rashid Ronald is being attacked. Rashid Ronald is one of the senior-most journalists in this country. He is known nearly to all security actors in the country. When a senior journalist of that caliber is attacked and roughed up by security agencies, do not expect that junior journalists that are starting in the profession would be able to ask a hard question. When you hear a statement from the CS, nobody has been killed, journalists are messing the country, what do you expect them to do in interrogating? So journalists have been pushed from hard questions to doing Jubilee Brigade or to doing NASA women. You know, those are soft things. We just need to see color. We need to see them in camouflage. And that becomes an entertainment story we end up.
You mentioned one problem, and I want you to hold on to the other two, but you talked about the narrative that is being controlled by PSU. Is there a narrative that is you have identified from the opposition side?
Yes, there is a narrative that following the Supreme Court decision, the opposition has clearly said it is impossible to run a credible election. What they haven't done is come out clearly and say, apart from changing personnel, because again, the Supreme Court decision did not say, let the current personnel run elections. We were told, let IBC run elections.
Right.
So IBC is an institution, even though it's the individuals in there that make it effective. But where individuals are culpable, there is a reason to say they shouldn't sit in there. But what the opposition hasn't done is to say, we hear the 60 days, we hear the legalities, we hear the constitutional principles. This is the effective way within which that can be done.
And you didn't hear that in the irreducible minimums? And
The irreducible minimums were talking about those changes without creating certainty. So what you begin to see, that Ngeno is speaking about the media creating uncertainty. The truth is, it's the two main political actors that have created this uncertainty. The media has only played ball.
Philip.
Yes.
Your response to this particular issue that is being brought up, that you have your own narrative and you have...
Brother Henry is misleading the nation on this show, on the issues that have been raised by the opposition with regard to what should be done at the IBC just before the said elections, repeat elections. One, I want to tell him that, you know, in the 11 irreducible minimums, we outlined all the issues that we wanted addressed by the IBC before they talk of a repeat election. And none of these 11 conditions that we gave has been addressed by the IBC. And the media has not interrogated the IBC on this issue of 11 of the irreducible minimums by the NASA. That's one thing that I've been keen on. I've been trying to watch, to read newspapers, you know. But not a single time have I seen a journalist booking an appointment with either the chair of the IBC or any of the commissioners to ask about these irreducible minimums by the NASA, which are pertinent issues that need to be addressed, and every Kenyan would agree with me that there are some issues, including those individuals who are mentioned in the August 8 presidential election scam. These individuals, in fact, the principals led by the Right Honorable Raila Odinga went public to mention the names of these 12 individuals. Then after mentioning those names, the media did not pick up. You know, as a journalist, a trained journalist, I would go against my editor's policy.
You want to tell me, in no report have you seen the allegations that have been brought forward by NASA being relayed or given a platform and put forward to
what I'm
the
saying
IBC?
Is whatever is done by the media is just to show on news what the NASA have said. NASA people have said in rallies or in press conferences. But following up to find out, have these issues been addressed by the IBC? Has the chairman of the IBC called a meeting of his commissioners to go through these particular issues that have been raised to ensure that they are addressed? Because NASA is also has a constituency and has a stake in the political
scene. The IEBC chair has called for some changes, and that particular story was actually given a lot of focus. What was that? Is it more of not hearing what you would want to hear as NASA wants it put? Or is it not being put forward, the questions, the crucial questions to the IEBC?
But Mark, when the IEBC chair announced that he had made some changes within the commission, were they effected? Did the media follow up to find out if those particular individuals that the chair spoke about had indeed left the commission? Nobody did that. What was done?
But the reason for why that didn't happen was what? The infighting that has been seen. And that's been
exactly what I'm
on.
talking about.
And that has been reported.
Have you dug into that infighting to find out what is the cause of that infighting within the commission?
Victor, let's hear you.
Sometimes I hold on, but sometimes we over-expect from media in the sense that, and I do, like you said, we monitor 139 radio stations in terms of content. I can give you clips by Mark Nyongesa on his program on Radio Maisha, who has done interviews including with Chiloba, with Chebukati, with your Secretary Maga. He have done extensively. I have clips to that effect. In addition, and both our politicians from whichever side own media houses in this country. I mean, from both sides. I have done a comparative analysis. I have never seen a content variation between a media house owned by a NASA, wherever, or a media house owned by Jubilee. So why has, if for example, NASA felt that media is not covering, and media, for example, here, people refer to Nation, Standard, KTN, that's the media. Forgetting that we have 66 TV stations, 139 radio stations in this country. So I think, including the Kenya Today newspaper owned by, so what has been the content difference between, for example, Kenya Today owned by the opposition and other content? So that we are making a professional judgment that one media house has been bought and ours is doing this. So I think the problem is not even where we are going. In terms of the 11, and I have seen, we were in Naivasha 2 weeks ago, when IBC released their response to the 10, 11, and they were carried in all our media houses. So sometimes we expect media to become the Supreme Court, the police, to arrest, because once media exposes something or talks about something or raises, it might not have done it in 100%, but once, there is also a limit to what media can do. Once media has run the 10 responses, for example, once like Mark Nyongesa has done those extensive discussions. In fact, he had a lot of challenges, 5 times having bookings with the NASA secretariat where he couldn't even get somebody to talk to. And he even posted. So what I'm saying that yes, there are instances where our journalists have messed and where we accept that here. But to make a judgment in terms of their performance simply because there's nowhere media in Kenya, media is in competition in Kenya. So to say that our media has been influenced by State House, for example, or by this part is wrong, it's a fallacy. It's just that how accessible, at what level of information do we release this information?
Okay.
So to me, I still hold that yes, there are differences. I mean, the media could have done better in America, but to say that our media either is influenced by, because sometimes also people fail to understand differences between editorial content that is paid for content and free content.
Right.
So that sometimes three-quarters of the complaints we get about media being influenced, like the live coverage of Jubilee launch, those were paid up content.
Okay.
They were not.
No, we are not talking about.
I'm just.
But there is
advertising.
Let's hold on.
Because if you look at, for example, and people have gone to court about the government delivers and what.
Yes.
I mean, people have gone to court and a court has pronounced itself to that, and we have raised those things. And people had discussion about that legal definition of were those purely advertisements, were they? I mean, and the media houses were advised by their own legal departments on what they viewed and looked at those geocoded.
Okay. Let me hold you on that. Let me hold you on that point, Jensen lady. And I can see Dorothy's really itching to give a comment. I have to take a break on this point. No, and don't accuse me of silencing Italio or anyone else. I really have to take a break. My director is on my case. We'll be back shortly, and he'll be the first to speak.